What's up guys, my name is Mark Steiner, and today we are going to be comparing the Sony 85mm 1.8 to the 85G Master with my friend Grayson. First up, we have the eye autofocus test, and as you can see here, this is working tremendously on the 1.4. It's getting my friend Grayson whenever he walks into frame. Whenever he steps out of frame, it focuses on the background and then gets him right back when he steps back into frame. And it does a good job even tracking when he's moving around like crazy. Here we have the 85 1.8, and here again, both lenses are tracking tremendously. I will say that the 1.8 just felt a little bit snappier in my testing. It did seem to focus just that little bit faster. That's going to make you feel a little bit more reliable, but both lenses perform very well. Now onto the video AF test. We're shooting this at 120 frames per second so you can see all those little details. Here you can see that the 1.8 is doing a much better job at tracking Grayson as he walks towards the camera, and the 1.8 is sharper than the 1.4, which is a little bit softer wide open. You can see the difference in the bokeh quality and the blurring of the bricks between the two here, with the 1.4 looking more dreamy than the 1.8. The 1.8, however, is able to focus on the wall significantly faster than the 1.4 after Grayson walks out of frame, and this happened quite a bit in testing. Both lenses miss Grayson walking through the frame here, but again, we were shooting at 120 frames per second, and that was a pretty quick motion. You can also see the difference in bokeh quality on Grayson's jacket, which I found very intriguing. When Grayson walks back into the frame, the 1.8 attempts to try and bring him back into focus before he ducks out of frame, whereas the 1.4 lags a little, and by the time it starts to attempt to focus on Grayson, he's already out of frame. When he comes back up, you can see a pretty big difference in focus speed. The 1.8 is able to grab focus before he turns, whereas the 1.4 gets him into focus after he's already turned. Here, the 1.8 did a better job at tracking Grayson as he walked away, attempting to focus track the moving subject, whereas the 1.4 just seems to wait until Grayson has stopped moving to actually bring him into focus. When Grayson initially starts to run, both lenses track him relatively well. The 1.4 seems to lose him first, and then the 1.8 loses him. But the 1.8 is able to get him tack sharp back into focus significantly faster than the 1.4, which, even after he stops running, still struggles to achieve critical focus. Now for the photo comparison. We have the 1.8 on the left and the 1.4 on the right, both with lens corrections turned on. Again, you can see the difference in bokeh quality in the 1.4, with the brick in the top left corner looking a little smoother, as well as the reflections coming off the glass in the background. Everything just looks a little bit more rounded and more creamy. The difference between 1.8 and 1.4 is about 2/3 of a stop, so the 1.4 is obviously going to be better in low light situations, and that's why it looks so much brighter here, because they were shot at the exact same settings, save for the aperture. If we bring up the exposure 2/3 of a stop to compensate, you can see a pretty big difference. The 1.8 is significantly sharper than the 1.4, which I did not expect, but the 1.4 does have more elements to move around, which does affect that. Some people don't mind having it be a little bit softer because it does make your editing life a little bit easier and your subject a little bit more flattering, whereas the 1.8 is so sharp that it shows every little detail on the skin and you do have to do more editing. The 85 1.4 is a tank of a lens, all metal build, and it's heavy, it's big, it's girthy. The 1.8 is a tiny little lens in comparison. It's not an all metal build, but it's a very high quality plastic that could fool someone into thinking that it is metal. It is significantly lighter and easier to hold. With the 1.4, you have to have one hand on the body and one hand on the lens, whereas with the 1.8, you don't really need a hand on the lens. The 1.4 is weather sealed and does have a declickable aperture ring for you video people out there. Both lenses have an AF/MF switch as well as a custom button. The 1.4 has a 77mm thread and the 1.8 has a 67mm thread. Alright guys, that's our battle between the 85mm. What do you think, Grayson?
Do I regret my purchase? No, I don't, but it just, is the price difference worth it?
I think we were talking about this off camera as well, and I think that for most people, they're not going to notice a huge difference between this $600 lens and this $1,600 lens.
Right.
And we were talking about, Instagram, if you're just scrolling through and you're not really focusing a lot on a photo, you're not gonna really tell the difference. But this lens definitely handles harder lighting situations better. It is weather sealed, it has more video functionality, and it just has this very pleasing, creamy bokeh that this one doesn't have. They both have good bokeh, but this one definitely has a character to it that you can tell in the images. And like, no matter where you point it, the background is going to look absolutely gorgeous. Whereas to this one, you need to do a little bit more thinking about the background because it doesn't blur it out quite as creamy. But I think they're both very good lenses. And at the end of the day, that big jump in price has a very little return, but for some people, it's definitely worth it. And I, shooting with this lens today, was mind blown. And I was so envious of Grace. And I was like, oh my God, these photos look so good. And we switched to mine and they're still good. It's just, you can definitely tell a difference if you're a photographer and you're a little bit envious of that 1.4.
It just depends on what you're gonna be shooting, what you're gonna be using the lens for.
Exactly. And for most people, this lens actually is sharper because there's less glass to push around. I was surprised by the video autofocus test. I thought yours would be faster than this one. But again, because of how much glass they have to push around to focus, I wasn't completely mind blown that this one actually is faster focusing. I do still think that this is more cinematic because of that background blur. Overall, is it worth the price difference? That's up to you to decide. All right, guys, my name has been Mark Steiner. This has been Grayson, and we will see you next time.
Peace. I don't know what I just did there.
No, that was good. You're good.